Welcome students, this is the fifth unit, database management system transaction processing. Here we are going to learn what is the outcome of this unit. We want to know what is transaction processing and what are the transaction properties, what are the states of transaction, and what is concurrency control, and what is schedule, types of schedules. All these topics we will discuss one by one. So this is the outcome of the transaction processing. Students, what is a transaction processing? So normally database management system, transaction is the very important term. So normally we can say database transaction is a logical unit of processing in a database management system which entails one or more database access operations. So this is very important definition. So all of you try to understand. So it is a logical unit. So what is the meaning of logical unit? Execution of a user program. This is called logical unit. So DBMS considers transaction as a list of actions that read, write, and update operations. So this is called database transactions. So normally database is accessed by two operations, that is read of X and write of X. So this is the simple definition. So all of you remember. So what is a transaction processing? Transaction processing is an execution of a user program, or in database management system we can consider transaction is a list of actions that read, write, and update database objects. Okay, that means we are trying to access the database. So this is called database transaction. So see here the definition given here. So whatever I explained here, the definition is here. You can see database transaction is a logical unit of processing in database management system which entails one or more database access operations. So that means read, write, and update operations. So all these operations are executed. So all these are list of actions executed once so successfully. So this is called database transaction. So here in all types of database access operations which are held between the beginning of the transaction and end of the transaction. So here beginning of the transaction, the database is in a consistent state. End of the transaction, the database is in a consistent state. So during the transaction, the database is inconsistent because here we are accessing the database and we are performing some operations, update operations. So here during the beginning and end of the transaction, we can say database is temporarily, it is inconsistent state during execution. So just you can see this picture. So this is the beginning of the transaction. So this is end transaction. Here database consistent state and here database consistent state. Okay. Once the execution completed successfully, the consistent state from begin transaction to end transaction will be changed. Okay. So definitely there is a change in database in a consistent state to database in a consistent state at the end of the transaction. So during this transaction, database may be temporarily inconsistent state. Okay, during execution, database is temporarily inconsistent state because we are performing here some database operations. So in this situation, we can say that database is inconsistent state. So I hope all of you understand. So what is a database transaction and when the database is consistent state? Okay, when the database is inconsistent state. Okay, so next. So here I given a small example of transaction. So we want to read the value of X, or a person is having a account in a bank and he want to draw the money, withdraw the money from his account. Suppose here the account is X. Okay. Suppose I'm thinking the account is X. So initially, so what is the normal procedure before withdrawal the money? So we want to find the balance of the X. After that, that balance always greater than the withdrawal amount. Okay. If withdrawal amount is greater than the balance, then it is not possible to draw the money. Okay. So there is a failure. Okay. So always it is withdrawal amount is always is less than or equal to balance. Okay. Then only you can withdraw the money. If you withdraw the money, that money is subtracted. Okay. That means deducted from the X balance. After that, after deduction, again we are going to write into the disk the balance of X. Okay. So these are the operations. So here initially we are reading the balance of X, then we are subtracting, that means we are updating again the account X. So after that we are writing the given remaining amount into X. Okay. So here you have to understand commit. So next slide I will explain what is commit, and in SQL what is a rollback, and we want to discuss about save point also, that slowly we can discuss. Okay, this is an example for simple transaction, a single transaction. Suppose if a person can perform two transactions at the same time. Okay, so now you can see here, if two persons want to transfer money, so there are two persons X and Y. So X want to transfer from X his account to Y some amount, maybe it is 500 or $50 or something. Okay, so initially we have to check the balance of X, and the same condition we will use like previous transaction. So transfer amount is always less than or equal to the balance. So here balance is greater than the transfer amount, then that balance is deducted from X. Okay. So here you try to understand how many operations performed after begin the transaction. So here read X balance. After reading the X balance, so we want to deduct the transfer amount to X balance. Okay. Then read Y balance. Okay. So why we have to read the Y balance? Because this transfer amount is added to the Y balance. So here we are updating the Y balance again here. So Y balance equal to Y balance plus transfer amount. So now here you try to understand commit. What is this commit? What are the updates performed during the transaction execution? Okay. So these changes saved permanently by using commit at SQL statement. So once the commit makes sure that all the changes made by transaction are made permanent. So that is the use of commit. Suppose you have a doubt, sir, when the transfer amount is deducted, here some problem occurs. So then what is the state of this transaction? So when the problem occurs, if there is any failure or there is a aborted condition, so automatically SQL uses rollback condition. Okay. So what is a rollback condition? So rollback is nothing but it terminates the transactions and resets any change made by the transaction. Okay, whatever the updates performed here, the amount is deducted, it rejects the changes, and the outcome of the failure transaction is, so it keeps the same amount, initial amount of X balance, it will keep remain same. Okay, so this is the rollback transaction. Okay, So here you have to understand what is a rollback. So rollback terminates the transactions and rejects any change made by the transaction. So this is very important definition. What is commit and rollback? So this up to here. So you have to know what is a transaction, okay, and what is a consistent state database. So when these databases are consistent state, so when the database is temporarily inconsistent, so during the transaction execution, the database is temporarily inconsistent, okay, inconsistent state. So begin and end transactions, the database consistent state is changed, okay, that means the values of whatever the variables used in beginning and whatever the variables you have at the end of the transaction, the values may be differ, okay. So here we can say that difference, we can say there is a consistent state change from the beginning transaction to the end of the transaction. So here once you executed successfully the transaction, when you are applying, you have a commit in SQL. That means whatever the updates performed during execution changed permanently. Transactions updates saved permanently in the database. Suppose if there is any failure occurs, so the outcome of the transaction is whatever the initial values, so those are the outcome of this transaction. If there is any failure, so then database or SQL uses rollback statement. This rollback rejects and terminates the transaction and rejects any change made by the transaction. So these are the important points and important definitions. So I hope everybody understand this.